Maria wiped the dust from the last picture frame in the long hallway. She had been working in this big house for 3 years now, and she knew every corner of it. The mansion belonged to Mr. Richard Harrison, one of the richest men in the city. He owned several businesses and had more money than most people could ever dream of having. But money couldn't buy happiness, and this house proved it every single day. The Harrison mansion was huge. It had 12 bedrooms, 8 bathrooms, a library bigger than most people's entire homes, and a kitchen that could feed 50 people. There were expensive paintings on every wall, crystal chandeliers hanging from high ceilings, and furniture that cost more than what Maria made in a whole year. Yet the house felt empty, cold, sad. Maria walked quietly through the rooms, her soft shoes making barely any sound on the marble floors. She had learned to move like a ghost in this place. Mr. Harrison didn't like noise. He didn't like disturbances. He wanted everything to be perfect and silent, just like a museum where people only whispered. 3 years ago, when Maria first started working here, the house had been different. There had been laughter then, music, life. Mrs. Elizabeth Harrison had been alive, and she filled every room with warmth. She would chat with Maria while she worked, asking about her family back in Mexico and sharing stories about her own childhood. Mrs. Elizabeth loved music more than anything else. She would play the grand piano in the living room every morning, filling the house with beautiful melodies. Sometimes she would sing too, her voice floating through the halls like sunshine. Little David, who was only 9 years old then, would sit beside her on the piano bench, trying to copy the notes with his small fingers. Those days felt like a lifetime ago. Now, Maria's footsteps echoed in the silence as she made her way to the living room. The grand piano still sat in the same spot, but nobody had touched it in 2 years. Mr. Harrison had pushed the bench far underneath it, as if he wanted to pretend the piano didn't exist. A thin layer of dust covered the black surface, making it look forgotten and abandoned. Maria always felt sad when she looked at that piano. She remembered how alive it used to be, how it used to bring joy to everyone in the house. Now it was just another piece of expensive furniture that nobody cared about. She took out her cleaning cloth and gently wiped the dust away. As she worked, she hummed a soft melody under her breath. It was a song her grandmother used to sing to her when she was little, back in the small village where she grew up. The melody was simple but beautiful, and it always made her feel better when she was sad. "Maria?" The quiet voice made her turn around. David was standing in the doorway, his hand touching the wall to guide himself. The 12-year-old boy looked so small in the huge doorway, like a lost bird in a giant cage. David had lost his sight 2 years ago in the same car accident that killed his mother. The doctors said there was nothing they could do to bring his vision back. Since then, his world had become very small and very quiet. "Hello, David," Maria said softly. "How are you feeling today?" The boy shrugged his thin shoulders. "Okay, I guess. Dad's in his office again. He's been on phone calls all morning." Maria nodded even though she knew David couldn't see her. Mr. Harrison was always working. It seemed like he buried himself in business to avoid thinking about his pain. But Maria could see that this hurt David even more. The boy needed his father's attention and love, especially now. "Are you hungry?" Maria asked. "I could make you a sandwich." "No, thank you," David said. He took a few careful steps into the room, his hand trailing along the wall. "Maria, can I ask you something?" "Of course, sweetheart. Do you ever miss the music?" Maria's heart squeezed tight in her chest. David rarely talked about the time before the accident. His father had made it clear that nobody should mention his mother or the things they used to do together. Mr. Harrison thought it would be too painful for David to remember. "Yes," Maria said honestly. "I miss it very much." David nodded slowly. He made his way across the room, counting his steps the way his mobility teacher had shown him. When he reached the piano, he stopped and put his small hand on the edge. "Sometimes I dream that I can still hear her playing," he whispered. "When I wake up, I try to remember the songs, but they fade away like smoke." Maria felt tears prick her eyes. This poor child was carrying so much sadness, and nobody was helping him deal with it. Mr. Harrison thought that avoiding painful memories would make David heal faster, but Maria could see that it was doing the opposite. "I remember one song she used to play a lot," David continued. "It was soft and gentle like rain on leaves. She said it was called Clair de Lune. Do you know it?" Maria knew the song well. Mrs. Elizabeth had played it almost every day. It was one of her favorites. "Yes, I know it," Maria said carefully. "I wish I could hear it again," David said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Just once." Maria looked around the empty room. Mr. Harrison was locked in his office and wouldn't come out for hours. She had cleaned this room 100 times and knew exactly how long each task took. She could spare a few minutes. Before she could change her mind, Maria sat down at the piano bench and lifted the cover over the keys. The black and white keys looked back at her like old friends waiting to be remembered. "Maria, what are you doing?" David asked, hearing the sound of the bench moving. "Close your eyes," Maria said gently, then caught herself. Just listen." She placed her fingers on the keys and began to play. The melody of Claire de Lune flowed from the piano like water, soft and peaceful and beautiful. Maria wasn't a professional pianist like Mrs. Elizabeth had been, but she had learned to play as a child in Mexico. Her grandmother had taught her on an old broken piano in their village church. David gasped when he heard the first notes. His whole face changed, lighting up like sunrise after a long, dark night. He stood perfectly still, drinking in every note, every pause, every gentle rise and fall of the melody. When Maria finished playing, the room fell silent again. But it was a different kind of silence now. It felt full instead of empty, warm instead of cold. "That was beautiful," David whispered, tears rolling down his cheeks. It sounded just like when she played it. Maria's heart broke a little more. This child needed music in his life. He needed beauty and joy and all the things that made life worth living. But she also knew what would happen if Mr. Harrison found out what she had just done. "David," she said carefully, "this has to be our secret, okay?" "Your father wouldn't understand." The boy nodded quickly. "I promise I won't tell anyone." "But Maria, could you maybe play it again sometime?" Maria looked at the piano keys, then at David's hopeful face. She thought about Mr. Harrison's strict rules and his anger when anyone disobeyed him. She thought about her job and how much she needed it to support her own family back in Mexico. But then she looked at David again, really looked at him. She saw a lonely, grieving child who had lost almost everything that mattered to him. She saw a boy who was hungry for music the way other people were hungry for food. "Maybe," she said softly, "when your father is at work, maybe I could play for you sometimes." David's smile was brighter than all the expensive chandeliers in the house. For the first time in 2 years, he looked truly happy. As Maria went back to her cleaning, she noticed something different about David. He wasn't walking with his shoulders hunched anymore. His steps seemed lighter, more confident. He even hummed a little bit of the melody she had played, very quietly so his father wouldn't hear. The rest of that day passed like any other day in the Harrison house. Mr. Harrison stayed locked in his office, making business calls and avoiding his son. David did his lessons with his tutor, ate his meals in silence, and went to bed early like always. But something had changed. Maria could feel it in the air like the electricity before a storm. She had planted a tiny seed of hope in David's heart, and she could already see it beginning to grow. That night, as she got ready to leave for her own small apartment across the city, Maria thought about what she had done. She knew it was risky. Mr. Harrison had made his rules very clear from the beginning. No music, no reminders of the past, no exceptions. But as she remembered the joy on David's face when he heard Claire de Lune, Maria knew she had made the right choice. Some rules were meant to be broken, especially when breaking them could heal a broken heart. She looked back at the big house with all its dark windows. Somewhere inside, a lonely boy was probably lying awake, humming a melody and dreaming of his mother. And tomorrow, if she was brave enough, Maria might just give him a few more notes to remember her by. The piano was waiting. The music was waiting. And for the first time in 2 years, there was hope waiting too. The next morning came with heavy rain clouds hanging over the city. Maria arrived at the Harrison mansion earlier than usual, her umbrella dripping water on the marble floor of the entrance hall. She always tried to get to work before Mr. Harrison woke up. It gave her time to prepare breakfast and organize her day, without having to worry about making too much noise. As she hung up her coat, she heard soft footsteps coming down the grand staircase. David appeared, already dressed in his school clothes even though his tutor wasn't coming for another 2 hours. He moved carefully, one hand on the wooden railing, counting steps the way he had learned to do. "Good morning, David," Maria said quietly. "You're up early today." I couldn't sleep much, David admitted, reaching the bottom of the stairs. I kept thinking about yesterday, about the music. Maria glanced toward Mr. Harrison's bedroom door at the top of the stairs. It was still closed, which meant he was still sleeping. He rarely got up before 8 o'clock, and it was only 6:30 now. Are you hungry? Maria asked, changing the subject. I could make pancakes. Maybe later, David said. He turned his head toward the living room where the piano waited in silence. Maria, do you think my mom would want me to learn to play? The question hit Maria like a punch to the stomach. She looked at this brave little boy who was trying so hard to connect with the mother he had lost. Her own eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them away quickly. I think your mother would want you to be happy, Maria said carefully. And if music makes you happy, then yes, I think she would want that very much. David nodded slowly as if he was making an important decision in his mind. Will you teach me? He asked suddenly. Not just play for me, but actually teach me how to do it myself? Maria's heart started beating faster. Playing a song for David was one thing. Actually teaching him to play was something completely different. It would take time, patience, and lots of practice. And practice meant noise that Mr. Harrison might hear. David, I don't know if that's a good idea, Maria said. Your father has very strict rules about— Please, David interrupted, and his voice was so full of hope that it broke Maria's heart. I know it's dangerous. I know Dad would be angry. But I need this, Maria. I feel like I'm disappearing a little bit more every day. The music yesterday made me feel alive again. Maria stared at this 12-year-old boy who was speaking like someone much older. The accident hadn't just taken his sight. It had forced him to grow up too fast, to understand pain and loss in ways that children shouldn't have to. She thought about her own childhood in Mexico, where music had been everywhere. Her grandmother playing guitar on the front porch. Her cousins singing while they worked in the fields. The whole village coming together on festival days to dance and laugh and celebrate life with songs that had been passed down for generations. Music wasn't just entertainment. It was medicine for the soul, and David's soul was very sick. Your father goes to his office building every Tuesday and Thursday for meetings, Maria said slowly. He's usually gone for at least 3 hours. David's face lit up like a Christmas tree. Does that mean yes? Maria looked around the quiet house, thinking about all the risks. She could lose her job. She could lose Mr. Harrison's trust. She could get in serious trouble, but then she looked at David again and she knew she couldn't say no. Yes, she whispered, but we have to be very, very careful. And if your father ever asks about anything, you have to promise to tell him it was all my idea. I don't want you getting in trouble for something I decided to do. David threw his arms around Maria's waist, hugging her tight. Thank you, he said, his voice muffled against her shoulder. Thank you so much. That Tuesday, Mr. Harrison left for his office at exactly 9 o'clock in the morning, just like he did every week. Maria watched his black car disappear down the long driveway, then turned to find David already sitting on the piano bench, his hands folded in his lap. I've been waiting for this moment since Sunday, he said with a shy smile. Maria sat down beside him on the bench. The piano suddenly felt huge and important, like they were about to climb a mountain together. Okay, she said, taking a deep breath. First, you need to learn where all the keys are. The piano has 88 keys total, but we're going to start with just a few. She took David's right hand and placed it gently on the keys. This is called middle C, she said, pressing his index finger down on the white key. It's right in the center of the piano, and it's going to be like your home base. No matter where you go on the piano, you can always find your way back to middle C. David pressed the key again, listening to the clear, simple note that rang out. It sounds friendly, he said. Maria smiled. That's a perfect way to describe it. Now let's find the other notes. For the next hour, Maria taught David the basics. She showed him how to find the pattern of black and white keys, how to sit properly on the bench, and how to curve his fingers like he was holding a small ball. David was a quick learner, his enhanced hearing helping him notice tiny differences in the sounds that other people might miss. Your mom was right, Maria said, as David successfully played a simple 5-note scale. You do have natural musical talent, she said that. David asked, his fingers pausing on the keys. She used to tell me that you had perfect pitch, Maria said. That means you can hear when notes are exactly right or when they're a little bit off. It's very rare and very special. David straightened up on the bench, pride filling his face. It was the first time anyone had told him he was good at something since the accident. His father and all the doctors and therapists were always focused on what he couldn't do anymore. Nobody talked about what he might be able to do. As the weeks passed, their secret piano lessons became the best part of both their days. Every Tuesday and Thursday, as soon as Mr. Harrison's car pulled out of the driveway, David would race to the piano and Maria would join him for their music time. David learned fast. Within a month, he could play simple melodies with both hands. Maria taught him Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star and Happy Birthday, and other songs that didn't require reading sheet music. She showed him how to feel the rhythm in his body, how to let the music flow through his fingers instead of forcing it. But more importantly, she watched David come back to life. The sad, quiet boy who barely spoke began to laugh during their lessons. He started asking questions about everything, not just music. He wanted to know about Maria's family, about Mexico, about what the world was like outside the walls of the mansion. "In my village," Maria told him one Thursday afternoon, "we have a saying. La música es el idioma del corazón. It means music is the language of the heart." "What does that mean exactly?" David asked, his fingers finding a soft melody on the keys. "It means that when words aren't enough to say what you feel, music can say it for you," Maria explained. "When you play the piano, you're not just pressing keys. You're telling your story." David nodded seriously. "What story am I telling right now?" He was playing a gentle, slightly sad melody that he had made up himself. Maria listened to the notes floating through the air and felt her heart squeeze. "I think you're telling the story of someone who misses his mother very much," she said softly, "but also someone who is finding hope again." David's hand stilled on the keys. "Is it okay to miss her and still feel happy sometimes?" "Oh, sweetheart," Maria said, putting her arm around his shoulders. "It's not just okay. It's exactly what she would want. Your mother wouldn't want your sadness about losing her to stop you from feeling joy about other things." As David's skills improved, something else began to change too. He started moving differently around the house. His steps were more confident, his shoulders straighter. He began humming little melodies while he did other things, very quietly so his father wouldn't hear. But keeping their secret was getting harder. One evening at dinner, Mr. Harrison noticed David tapping his fingers on the table in a complex rhythm. "David, stop that noise," his father said sharply. David's fingers froze. "Sorry, Dad, I didn't realize I was doing it." Mr. Harrison studied his son's face for a long moment. "You seem different lately, more energetic." Maria, who was serving dinner, felt her heart start racing. She kept her face calm and continued placing dishes on the table. "I'm feeling better, I think," David said carefully. "The physical therapy is helping." It wasn't completely a lie. The piano lessons were like physical therapy for his hands and arms. But Maria could see the guilt on David's face for not telling his father the whole truth. That night, after Mr. Harrison had gone to bed, David found Maria in the kitchen while she was finishing the dinner dishes. "I hate lying to him," David whispered, "but I'm scared that if he finds out, he'll make us stop." Maria dried her hands on a towel and turned to face him. "I know it's hard, but sometimes we have to make difficult choices to protect the things we love." "Do you think we're doing something wrong?" David asked. Maria thought about that question for a long time. She thought about Mr. Harrison's rules and his fears. She thought about her job and her responsibilities. But mostly, she thought about the joy she had seen growing in David over the past few weeks. 3 months into their secret piano lessons, David had become a completely different child. The change was so dramatic that even Mr. Harrison began to notice, though he couldn't figure out what was causing it. "He seems happier," Mr. Harrison mentioned to Maria one morning as she served his breakfast. "More alert. Do you think the new vitamins his doctor prescribed are working?" Maria kept her face neutral as she poured his coffee. "Perhaps, sir. Children do go through phases." What Mr. Harrison didn't know was that David had progressed far beyond simple melodies. He could now play complete songs with both hands, switching between melody and harmony like he had been doing it for years instead of months. His natural talent, combined with his enhanced hearing abilities, made him learn at an incredible speed. But more than his musical skills, it was David's entire personality that had transformed. The quiet, withdrawn boy had been replaced by someone curious, talkative, and full of life. During their lessons, he would ask Maria endless questions about everything. "Tell me about the ocean. David said one Tuesday afternoon, his fingers dancing across the keys as he played a flowing melody he had composed himself. I remember going to the beach before the accident, but I can't remember what the waves sounded like. Maria smiled as she listened to his music. The melody really did sound like ocean waves rising and falling in gentle rhythms. The waves sound like breathing, she said, like the earth is sleeping peacefully. Sometimes they whisper onto the sand and sometimes they crash like thunder, but they never stop moving, never stop singing their song. David's melody grew stronger, more confident. Like this? Exactly like that, Maria said, amazed at how he could translate her words into music. You're not just playing notes, David. You're painting pictures with sound. These conversations had become just as important as the piano lessons themselves. Through music, David was rediscovering his connection to the world around him. He wanted to know about birds and storms and city traffic and quiet forests. Then he would create musical pieces that captured what he imagined these things might sound like. My grandmother used to say that blind musicians hear music differently, Maria told him during one of their sessions. She said they can hear colors and feel temperatures in the notes. What color is this? David asked, playing a bright, cheerful melody in a major key. Yellow, Maria said without hesitation, like sunshine. And this? He switched to a deeper, more mysterious tune in a minor key. Purple, like the sky just before night falls. David grinned. I can feel it too. The yellow song feels warm on my skin, and the purple one feels cool and peaceful. As David's confidence grew, he began making requests for specific songs. But they weren't random requests. Each song he asked for had a special meaning, a memory attached to it. Could you teach me For Elise? He asked one Thursday. Mom used to play it when she was sad. She said it helped her feel better. Maria knew the piece well. It was one of the most famous piano compositions ever written, with a melody that was both melancholy and hopeful at the same time. It's a difficult piece, Maria warned him, much harder than anything we've worked on before. I want to try, David said firmly. I need to learn it. So they began working on Für Elise, measure by measure, note by note. David's determination was incredible. He would practice the same difficult passages over and over again, never getting frustrated, never giving up. His small hands stretched to reach notes that seemed impossible for someone his size, but somehow he managed. During this time, Maria began sharing more stories about her own life. She told David about growing up in a small Mexican village where everyone knew everyone else, where music was part of daily life like eating and sleeping. My grandmother was the village piano teacher, Maria said as David worked through a particularly challenging section of the piece. She had an old piano that was missing 3 keys and was completely out of tune, but she taught half the children in the village how to play on it. What happened to her? David asked, pausing in his practice. She died when I was 16, Maria said softly, but before she passed away, she made me promise that I would always keep music alive wherever I went. She said music was like a gift that was meant to be shared, not kept locked away. David was quiet for a moment, thinking about this. Is that why you're teaching me? Because of your promise to her? Partly, Maria admitted, but mostly because I can see how much joy it brings you. And joy is something the world needs more of. As the weeks passed, David's playing of Für Elise improved dramatically. But something else was happening too. He was beginning to understand the emotional story the music was telling. When he played the gentle, questioning opening, his face would become thoughtful and sad. When the melody grew more urgent and passionate, his whole body would lean into the music. And when it returned to the peaceful ending, he would smile softly, as if he had found the answer to an important question. You're not just playing the notes anymore, Maria observed during one lesson. You're feeling the story. I think I understand now why Mom used to play this when she was sad, David said. That's like the music is having a conversation with your feelings. It doesn't make the sadness go away, but it makes it feel less lonely. Maria felt tears prick her eyes. This 12-year-old boy was understanding things about music and emotion that some adults never learned. Their lessons had expanded beyond just piano playing. David wanted to learn about music theory, about how songs were constructed, about different composers and styles. Maria taught him everything she knew, and when that wasn't enough, she borrowed books from the library and read them to him. Bach was German, like Beethoven, she explained one day, but their music was very different. Bach's music is like architecture. Everything fits together perfectly like a beautiful building made of sound. And Beethoven? David asked. Beethoven's music is like a storm, Maria said. Powerful and emotional and sometimes a little wild. He wrote some of his most beautiful pieces after he lost his hearing. David's eyes widened. He was deaf like I'm blind? Yes. And people said it made his music even more beautiful because he had to feel it instead of just hearing it. This knowledge seemed to inspire David even more. If Beethoven could create masterpieces without being able to hear them, then maybe being blind didn't have to limit what David could accomplish. As David's musical abilities grew, so did the challenge of keeping their secret. He would unconsciously hum melodies throughout the day. His fingers would tap out complex rhythms on any surface he touched. And sometimes he would get so lost in musical thoughts that he wouldn't respond when his father spoke to him. David seems distracted lately, Mr. Harrison mentioned to his son's tutor. His mind appears to be somewhere else during lessons. The tutor, Mrs. Henderson, had noticed it too. He's definitely less focused on his regular studies, she agreed. But I have to say he seems much happier overall. Whatever is causing the distraction, it's not necessarily a bad thing. But Mr. Harrison didn't see it that way. He had become convinced that happiness was dangerous for David, that contentment would make him careless and vulnerable to getting hurt again. He started watching his son more closely, looking for signs of whatever was causing this change. One evening, David made a mistake that almost gave them away completely. They were having dinner together in the formal dining room, something Mr. Harrison insisted on even though it was just the two of them at a table that could seat 12 people. David was eating quietly, lost in thought about a new melody he was working on. Suddenly, without realizing what he was doing, he began humming For Elise under his breath. Mr. Harrison's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. "David, what was that?" David's face went pale. "What was what, Dad?" "That tune you were humming. I know that melody." Maria, who was clearing dishes from the sideboard, felt her heart stop beating. She watched David's face, saw the panic in his eyes, and wanted to do something to help him but didn't know what. I don't know," David stammered. "I guess it was just something I made up." Mr. Harrison's eyes narrowed. "You made up For Elise?" "David, that's a famous piece by Beethoven. Where did you hear it?" The silence in the room was deafening. Maria could see David's hands shaking as he tried to think of an explanation that wouldn't give away their secret. "Maybe I heard it somewhere," David said weakly. "On TV or something." "We don't watch classical music programs," Mr. Harrison said, his voice getting harder. "And you don't listen to music. I specifically made sure there were no musical influences in this house." David's breathing was getting faster, the way it did when he was about to have a panic attack. Maria could see that he was about to break down and confess everything. "Sir," Maria said quickly, stepping forward, "I was playing some classical music on my phone while I cleaned the living room yesterday." Perhaps David overheard it. Both father and son turned toward her. Mr. Harrison's face was suspicious, but David showed pure gratitude. "You were playing music in this house?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice dangerously quiet. "Yes, sir," Maria said, lifting her chin. "Very quietly, just for background while I worked. I didn't think it would be a problem." "Well, it is a problem," Mr. Harrison snapped. "I don't want any music in this house." "None at all. Is that understood?" "Yes, sir," Maria said. "It won't happen again." For the next 2 weeks, Maria and David had to be more careful than ever before. Mr. Harrison was watching them both with suspicious eyes, looking for any sign that something was going on behind his back. Their piano lessons became shorter and quieter, and they had to develop new ways to communicate about music, without anyone else noticing. David would tap Morse code rhythms on the breakfast table to let Maria know when he had been practicing fingering exercises in his room. Maria would hum specific melodies while she worked to tell David which pieces they would work on during their next lesson. It was like they had created their own secret language made entirely of music, but the pressure of keeping such a big secret was wearing on both of them. David had dark circles under his eyes from staying awake at night, practicing silent finger movements on his bedsheets so he wouldn't forget what he had learned. Maria found herself jumping every time Mr. Harrison entered a room, afraid that somehow he would be able to tell just by looking at her face that she was hiding something important. The breakthrough moment came on a Tuesday in late October. Mr. Harrison had left for his usual business meetings, but he had told Maria that he might come home early, because one of his appointments had been canceled. This meant their lesson time would be cut short, maybe to just 30 minutes instead of their usual 3 hours. David was frustrated by the time constraints. He had been working on a particularly beautiful piece called Moonlight Sonata, and he was so close to mastering it. The melody haunted him during the day, and he could feel it just on the edge of his fingertips waiting to be played perfectly. "I think I can get it right today," he told Maria as they sat down at the piano. "Just give me a few more minutes with the difficult section." Maria glanced nervously at the clock. They had already been practicing for 20 minutes, and she knew Mr. Harrison could return at any moment. But David looked so determined, so close to achieving something he had been working toward for weeks. "Okay," she said. "But if we hear the car in the driveway, you have to stop immediately and get away from the piano." David nodded and placed his hands on the keys. What came out was pure magic. The Moonlight Sonata began with its famous haunting melody, those slow, mysterious notes that sounded like moonbeams dancing on water. David's interpretation was flawless. Every note was clear and precise, but more than that, every note had feeling behind it. He wasn't just playing the music, he was living inside it. As the piece progressed into its more complex middle section, David's hands moved with confidence and grace across the keys. His enhanced hearing allowed him to detect every subtle change in tone, every delicate variation that made the difference between playing notes and making music. Maria watched in amazement. In just a few months, this boy had developed skills that most piano students took years to achieve. But more importantly, he had developed something that couldn't be taught: the ability to pour his soul into the music and make others feel what he was feeling. The piece built to its dramatic climax, David's hands flying across the keys with passionate intensity. The music filled the entire house, echoing off the high ceilings and marble floors. It was impossible to hear this performance and not be moved by it. And that's exactly what happened. Neither Maria nor David heard the front door open. Neither of them heard the careful footsteps crossing the entrance hall. They were both completely lost in the music, transported to another world where only beauty and emotion existed. Mr. Harrison stood in the doorway of the living room, frozen in complete shock. His son, his blind son who wasn't supposed to be exposed to music or any other dangerous activities, was playing one of the most difficult pieces in the classical piano repertoire. And he was playing it better than many professional musicians could. The music came to its gentle, peaceful ending, the final notes hanging in the air like a prayer. David's hands remained on the keys for a moment, his face glowing with satisfaction and joy. "That was perfect," Maria said softly. "Your mother would have been so proud." It was only then that David sensed another presence in the room. His enhanced hearing picked up the sound of someone breathing heavily, someone whose heartbeat was racing with shock and anger. "Dad?" David whispered, his face going white with fear. Maria spun around on the piano bench and saw Mr. Harrison standing in the doorway. His face was a mixture of emotions she had never seen before: shock, betrayal, anger, and something else that looked almost like grief. "How long?" Mr. Harrison asked, his voice barely controlled. "How long has this been going on?" Neither Maria nor David answered. They sat frozen at the piano like two criminals caught in the act of committing a crime. "I asked you a question," Mr. Harrison said, stepping into the room. "How long have you been lying to me?" "Sir, I can explain," Maria began, but Mr. Harrison cut her off with a sharp gesture. "Don't!" His voice was like ice. "Don't you dare try to explain this away. I trusted you. I trusted you with my son's safety, with his well-being, and you betrayed that trust." David found his voice. "Dad, please don't be angry with Maria. This was my idea. I asked her to teach me." "Your idea?" Mr. Harrison laughed, but there was no humor in it. "David, you're 12 years old. You don't get to make decisions about what's safe for you. That's my job as your father." "But I'm safe," David said, his voice stronger now. "Look at me, Dad. Really look at me. Have I been hurt by learning music? Have I been damaged in any way?" Mr. Harrison stared at his son, and for the first time in months he really saw him. David was sitting straighter than he had in 2 years. His face was bright and animated instead of withdrawn and sad. His hands were confident on the piano keys, instead of constantly reaching out for walls and furniture to guide him. But seeing these positive changes only made Mr. Harrison angrier. "That's not the point," he said. "The point is that music leads to performance. Performance leads to public exposure. Public exposure leads to risks, to dangers, to possibilities for you to get hurt. Dad, David started, but his father wasn't finished. Do you remember what happened the last time you were involved with music? Mr. Harrison's voice was rising now, years of suppressed pain and fear pouring out. Your mother was driving you to a piano recital. A piano recital, David. If there had been no music in our lives, if we had never allowed you to perform, your mother would still be alive and you would still be able to see. The words hung in the air like poison. David's face crumpled as if he had been physically hit. Richard, no, Maria said, standing up from the piano bench. You can't blame a child for— Stay out of this, Mr. Harrison snapped. You've done enough damage. You're fired. I want you out of this house immediately. Dad, please, David begged, tears streaming down his face. Don't fire Maria, and don't take away the music. It's the only thing that makes me feel alive. Alive? Mr. Harrison's voice cracked. You want to feel alive? David, I would rather have you safe and sad than happy and dead. I already lost your mother. I won't lose you too. He walked over to the piano and slammed the cover down over the keys with a loud bang that made both David and Maria jump. This piano will be locked, he announced. No one will touch it again. And David, you will never ever play music again. Do you understand me? David was sobbing now, his small body shaking with grief and frustration. You can't stop the music in my head, he whispered. You can lock the piano, but you can't lock away what I've learned. Mr. Harrison's face went very still. We'll see about that. He turned to Maria, his eyes burning with anger and betrayal. Get your things and get out. If I ever see you near my son again, I'll call the police. Maria felt her own tears starting to fall. She looked at David sitting alone at the silent piano and her heart broke for him. But she also looked at Mr. Harrison and saw something that surprised her. He was crying too. Very quietly, almost invisibly, but definitely crying. This wasn't just anger. This was terror. This man was so afraid of losing his son that he was willing to destroy David's happiness to keep him safe. Mr. Harrison, Maria said quietly, I know you think I've betrayed your trust, but look at your son. Really look at him. In the past 3 months, has he been happier or sadder? Has he been more confident or more afraid? Has learning music hurt him or helped him? It doesn't matter, Mr. Harrison said, but his voice was less certain now. It's too dangerous. The risks are too great. Living is dangerous, Maria said, but not living. That's worse than any risk. She walked over to David and put her hand gently on his shoulder. Remember everything I taught you, she whispered. Music doesn't live in pianos. It lives in here. She touched his chest over his heart. No one can take that away from you. David nodded, still crying but trying to be brave. Will I ever see you again? I don't know, Maria said honestly. But I want you to know that teaching you has been the greatest honor of my life. You have a gift, David, a real gift. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. She gathered her purse and coat, taking one last look around the room where so much joy and music had lived for a few precious months. The piano sat silent and closed, already looking abandoned. As she walked toward the door, Mr. Harrison spoke again. You've ruined everything, he said. But his voice sounded tired now instead of angry. He was getting better. He was learning to accept his limitations. The weeks that followed Maria's departure were the darkest the Harrison mansion had experienced since the accident. Mr. Harrison had hired a new housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, who was efficient but cold. She followed every rule exactly, never spoke unless spoken to, and treated David like a fragile piece of glass that might break if handled incorrectly. David had retreated back into himself, but this time it was worse than before. He barely ate, rarely spoke, and spent most of his time lying in his room staring at the ceiling with sightless eyes. The joy and confidence that had grown in him over the months with Maria seemed to have disappeared completely. Mr. Harrison told himself this was for the best. David was safe now, protected. No more dangerous ideas about music or performance or any of the things that could lead to tragedy. But watching his son waste away day by day, he began to wonder if safety was worth this price. The piano remained locked, just as he had promised. But sometimes late at night, Mr. Harrison would walk past the living room and stop at the doorway. He would stare at the silent instrument and remember the sound of David playing Moonlight Sonata with such skill and passion. Despite his anger and fear, he couldn't deny that his son had been magnificent that day. 3 weeks after firing Maria, Something happened that changed everything. Mr. Harrison was going through his late wife's belongings, something he had been avoiding for 2 years. He had decided it was finally time to pack away her clothes and personal items. Maybe removing these painful reminders would help both him and David move forward. He was in Elizabeth's walk-in closet, carefully folding her dresses into boxes, when he found something hidden behind a row of shoes. It was a small wooden box, one he had never seen before. His hands trembling slightly, he opened it. Inside were several folded letters, all in Elizabeth's handwriting. The top one was addressed to him in her elegant script, "For Richard to be read after I'm gone." Mr. Harrison sat down heavily on the closet floor and opened the letter with shaking hands. As he read, tears began streaming down his face. "My dearest Richard," the letter began, "if you're reading this, it means I'm no longer with you and David. I know how hard this must be for both of you, and I wish I could be there to help you through it. I'm writing this letter because I know you, my love. I know that when tragedy strikes, your first instinct will be to build walls around David to protect him from ever being hurt again. I know you'll want to keep him safe from everything that might pose even the smallest risk. But Richard, I need you to understand something very important. David was born to make music. Even before he could walk, he would hum along when I played piano. By the time he was 3, he could pick out melodies by ear. His musical gift isn't just a hobby or an interest, it's part of who he is at the deepest level. I know that music might seem dangerous to you now. I know you might blame it for whatever circumstances led to my death. But please, please don't take music away from David. It would be like taking away his ability to breathe. Our son has something special inside him, something that could bring joy to thousands of people someday. But more importantly, music is how David processes his emotions, how he connects with the world, how he finds meaning in life. Without it, he will never be truly whole. I know you're afraid. I understand that fear because I feel it too. But sometimes the most loving thing we can do is let go of our fear and trust in our children's gifts. David's music won't put him in danger. It will give him strength to face whatever dangers life brings. Please don't let my death be the reason his music dies too. Let him play. Let him learn. Let him share his gift with the world. It's what I would want more than anything. I love you both so much. Take care of each other and remember that sometimes the greatest protection we can give someone is the freedom to become who they're meant to be. All my love always. Elizabeth P.S. There are more letters in this box for different occasions. Please read them when you need guidance. I tried to think of everything you might face in raising David alone. Mr. Harrison sat in that closet for over an hour, reading the letter again and again. Each time he read it, he felt another piece of his carefully constructed wall of fear crumble away. Elizabeth had known him so well. She had predicted exactly how he would react to losing her, exactly what mistakes he would make in trying to protect David. And she had tried to guide him toward a better path, even from beyond the grave. With trembling hands, he opened the second letter. This one was labeled, "For when David seems lost and you don't know how to reach him. My darling Richard," it began, "if David has withdrawn from life, if he seems sad and distant and unreachable, the answer isn't to protect him more. The answer is to remind him that he still has reasons to live fully. Music will always be his way back to joy. When words fail, when comfort isn't enough, when nothing else can reach him, music will. It's his native language, his most natural form of expression. Don't be afraid of his gift. Be proud of it. Nurture it. Help it grow. Our son was meant to bring beauty into a world that desperately needs it." Mr. Harrison closed his eyes and leaned back against the closet wall. For 2 years, he had been so focused on preventing David from getting hurt that he had actually been hurting him in a different way. He had taken away the one thing that gave David's life meaning and purpose. The third letter was labeled, "About finding David a music teacher." "Richard, I know you're reading these out of order." Elizabeth had written with what Mr. Harrison could imagine was a gentle smile. "You always did read the ending of books first when you were nervous about them. When the time comes to find David a music teacher, don't just look for technical skill. Look for someone who understands that teaching music is about much more than correct finger placement and proper posture. Look for someone who sees music as a language of the heart. David will need a teacher who can help him process his emotions through music, who can show him that his blindness doesn't limit his musical possibilities, but might actually enhance them. Many of history's greatest musicians overcame physical challenges because their limitations forced them to develop other abilities more fully. Most importantly, find someone who believes in David's potential, even when he doesn't believe in it himself. Find someone who will love him and encourage him, and never let him give up on his dreams. As Mr. Harrison read this letter, an image came into his mind. Maria sitting beside David at the piano, her face glowing with pride as she listened to him play. Maria, who had seen David's potential when everyone else saw only limitations. Maria, who had loved his son enough to risk her job to give him what he needed. Maria, who he had fired and banished from their lives in his fear and anger. The fourth letter was simply labeled "About Forgiveness." "There will come a time," Elizabeth had written, "when you realize you've made mistakes in raising David alone, when you understand that your fear led you to make choices that hurt him instead of helping him. Please forgive yourself. Being a parent means making difficult decisions with incomplete information. It means doing your best with what you know at the time, even when your best isn't perfect. But more importantly, don't let pride keep you from fixing your mistakes. If you've hurt David by trying to protect him, find a way to undo that hurt. If you've pushed away people who could help him, find a way to bring them back. Love means being willing to admit when you're wrong. Love means being brave enough to change course when you discover a better path." Mr. Harrison was crying openly now, tears falling onto the paper and blurring Elizabeth's careful handwriting. She had known. Somehow, she had known exactly what would happen and exactly what he would need to hear to find his way back to the right path. The last letter was labeled, "For David's Future." "I won't be there to see David grow up," Elizabeth had written, "but I can picture the man he'll become. I see him on stage, sharing his gift with audiences who are moved to tears by his music. I see him teaching other children, passing on what he's learned. I see him living a full, rich life filled with purpose and joy. But this future is only possible if he's allowed to develop his musical gifts, if he's encouraged to take risks, to perform, to put himself out there in the world. Yes, these things are scary. Yes, there's always a chance he could get hurt. But Richard, there's an even greater chance that he'll soar. Don't let your fear clip his wings before he has a chance to discover how high he can fly. The world needs David's music. More importantly, David needs his music. Trust in his strength. Trust in his gifts. Trust in the love we've given him to guide him through whatever challenges he faces. And remember, the greatest tragedy wouldn't be if something happened to David while he was pursuing his dreams. The greatest tragedy would be if he never got the chance to pursue them at all. Mr. Harrison sat in that closet until the sun began to set, reading and rereading Elizabeth's words. When he finally emerged, he felt like a different person. The fear was still there. It probably always would be. But it was no longer in control. He walked slowly through the house until he found David in his room, lying on his bed facing the wall. The boy looked thin and pale, like a flower that hadn't seen sunlight in too long. "David," Mr. Harrison said softly, "we need to talk."